guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched the Prom on Netflix. Let's talk about it. The Prom is a film directed by Ryan Murphy, which centers around the character of Emma, who has been prohibited from attending her school's prom because she's a lesbian and she is not allowed to bring a female date with her, which is just absolutely terrible, absolutely awful. So this film centers around the struggles of this openly gay character as she tries to navigate the world of high school in Indiana, in a very conservative area seemingly, and she's accompanied on her journey by these four Broadway stars who are kind of down on their luck and they want to reinvigorate their careers and their reputations. So they decide to join her on her crusade and join her journey of self-discovery, self-acceptance, and hopefully bringing about the best prom of this girl's life. Now, I thoroughly enjoyed this film, as you could probably tell from my mood here. I thought it was such a fun, feel-good film that was injected with a lot of energy, a lot of positivity, a lot of cheesiness as well. I mean, it's incredibly cheesy. It is incredibly, almost insufferably cheesy, but that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be campy. It's supposed to be over the top. I think this is very much Ryan Murphy's bread and butter, and he very much delivers on his brand here. Now, like I said, this film has Ryan Murphy at the helm, and if you've watched some of my past reviews for Ryan Murphy projects, you'll know that I have some issues with some of his projects, and the main issue seems to be that he tends to tackle way too much in a single project, and a lot of these different story arcs and character arcs are left quite underserved and not really fulfilled. And that tends to be my criticism, is that, you know, when you're tackling all of these social issues at once, you're not really doing them justice in terms of fully portraying the nuances of them. And I think here, the fact that he's decided to focus on this openly gay character and her experience in high school really benefits this film, because it doesn't try to tackle too many social issues at once. This is already a very worthy topic to try to tackle, and I think the fact that he's just focusing on this one really benefits the story overall. It also helps that not only do we have Ryan Murphy at the helm here, but this film also has an incredible cast. Like, we have Meryl Streep, we have James Corden, which I'll talk about in a second. We also have Nicole Kidman, Kerry Washington, Keegan-Michael Key. Like, the cast is stacked here, okay? And they definitely deliver. No one is phoning it in this film. They're putting in 110% of energy, of campiness. They are committed. They are earning that paycheck. And I was really happy to see that, because that level of energy was really infectious towards the audience. And that very much benefits the film, because even in moments where it feels like, okay, this is a bit too sweet and overly saccharine, we still get an enjoyment out of it, because there's still this underlying sense of, you know, genuine enjoyment and energy. It doesn't feel cynical in any way, and I really appreciated that about that. And I think it was driven by the cast's performance, because they genuinely seem to, you know, love this story and genuinely seem to buy into the characters that they were portraying. Now, like I suggested earlier, I did very much side-eye James Corden being cast in the role that he is in this film. He's portraying an openly gay man who has struggled in the past with coming out to his family and being rejected, and so he has to kind of deliver on that pathos in his performance here. I personally felt it kind of rang a little bit insincere, considering he's not actually a gay actor. I personally don't know why Ryan Murphy wouldn't get a gay actor to portray this character in this role, but he seemed to think that James Corden fit the bill, even though he has a terrible accent. He has a terrible American accent here. Even I can hear it as a Brit. But anyway, really don't know why he was cast, other than he works really well with Meryl Streep. Like, he works really well with the rest of the cast. He puts a ton of energy into his performance still. So even though it doesn't make sense on paper, him being in this film, especially in this role, I think ultimately his performance is good, and he does bring that infectious energy on screen, which really does bring a lot to the character. I also very much enjoyed Andrew Rannells' performance. He portrays a character who, his whole shtick is basically that he went to Juilliard and he can't shut up about it. It's like people who went to like Cambridge or Oxford or Harvard, like that's pretty much their personality. The fact that they went went to those institutions, and I kind of loved that. Like, I was kind of living for that. It did make for a very one-dimensional character, which we'll talk about later on, but overall it was a pretty funny shtick, and I think he was really great. You know, each of these, you know, main cast members get like a key musical sequence where they really get to shine, and I think his was pretty cool, even though I was side-eyeing it the most out of all the other ones because narratively it just seemed far too easy, far too simplistic. The fact that he was able to convince everyone that being gay is okay, and it's, you know, according to Jesus's teachings, in just one song sequence, was like, okay, maybe we're using a little bit of imagination here, but I still very much enjoyed his delivery of that performance. And just in general, like, the performances here in terms of the songs and the musical sequences are pretty great. Again, everyone has that energy, everyone's giving 110%. My only criticism of the sequences would be that the songs themselves aren't particularly memorable. They aren't particularly memorable. Listen, Broadway music, okay, theatre music doesn't tend to be my favorite genre of music. I already said this when I was reviewing, I think, Hamilton. Well, of course, Hamilton. I think Hamilton is actually an exception because almost every song bangs on that soundtrack. Truly, there's some special sauce in that Lin-Manuel Miranda soundtrack. Whereas here, it's much more of a generic, like, theatre music style where the songs have no rhyming. Oh, that's my pet peeve. How can you have a song where the lyrics don't rhyme? Like, I keep waiting for the rhyme and they'll say something else and it's just so jarring. Like, that's really not my favorite. I do prefer songs that are a little bit more catchy. Like, I think the greatest example of this would definitely be The Greatest Showman. The Greatest Showman achieved a rarity in that every single song on that goddamn soundtrack was a bop. Every single song. I remember that soundtrack trended. It was like #1 on iTunes for ages, and that is for a reason. And I think if films like The Prom want to follow that lead, they definitely need to contact whoever wrote the songs on The Greatest Showman, because they had something special in their songs as well, truly. Speaking of the characters, as I mentioned before, I do think that overall they're quite simplistic. They're quite one-dimensional. They don't have a lot of depth to them. I think especially when you take into account, you know, the big stars, the Broadway stars that are being portrayed by huge stars in the film, it feels like their characters are very two-dimensional, but they kind of added certain aspects to their characters, like the fact that James Corden's character had a difficult relationship with his parents after coming out to them, and the fact that he never had a prom. Like, they kind of added that to add a little bit more nuance and a little bit more pathos to his character to make him be able to relate to the character of Emma better. And also, as a slight spoiler, I guess, they also add this kind of love story between Keegan-Michael Key's character and Meryl Streep's character, which makes no goddamn sense. It makes no goddamn sense. But honestly, like, I didn't even hate it. Like, truly, I didn't hate it. I think it's mostly because the actors are like, they're actoring in this film. So I was convinced, like, even though I found the relationship to be totally superfluous, totally unnecessary, I was kind of convinced by the chemistry. What can I say? But still, the characters are quite two-dimensional. Like, they're not overly complex in any way, but they do take up a lot of the screen time, which is interesting. And I think that would be my major criticism, is that, you know, in all this time that I've been reviewing this film about Emma, I haven't really been talking about Emma. The main reason for that is because for a lot of the film, she kind of feels like an afterthought, especially in the first half of the film. It's very much about them. It's very much about the Broadway stars. And in a kind of meta way, I feel like that's because they're portrayed by these huge actors with this incredible cast. So the character of Emma kind of gets the short end of the stick, because she doesn't really attract as much interest in this story as these other characters, which kind of doesn't make sense when you consider the overall message of this film, which is that, you know, it wasn't really about them. It was about them learning some humility and learning to put someone else above themselves for once. But the film itself focuses on them as characters way more than her. So it's kind of undermining its own message in that way. In terms of the character of Emma, I found her to be quite likable. She's portrayed by Jo Ellen Pellman, and I think she did a really good job as this character. She came across as very sympathetic and someone who just wanted to have something that all other teenagers have. They get to go to their prom, to be with someone that they really care about and love for that moment, and have that, night of magic for once. This is just something that everyone gets to have. So why not her? And the fact that the whole town is against her because she has different beliefs and she has, a different life to what their ideal life looks like, is just something that everyone could get on board. Anyone who's ever felt like they don't belong can definitely get on board with this story, and anyone who hasn't felt that way can see this story and try to relate to someone else. And I think a story like that is really important and really impactful for so many people's lives, because it's very relevant. Unfortunately, it's very relevant for a lot of the world. Another issue that I had with this film is I couldn't help but kind of roll my eyes a little bit in some parts, mostly because it commits that cardinal sin that Hollywood loves to do. Truly, Hollywood loves to commit this sin, and that is kind of shunning, kind of dismissing, kind of scoffing at every other career path other than the creatives, other than the arts, other than Hollywood or Broadway. Like, this film really lays that on thick, and I kept waiting for there to be, a turn of events where the characters admit, like, you know what, you guys aren't so bad. Even if you're not, actors or dancers or singers, you guys do have a special place in the community. But no, no, this film never gets to that part. It still sticks with its message that actors are, essential workers, that actors are essential, that they bring forth, magic and joy out of people's miserable lives. Like, that is literally a whole song, a whole message in this film, and I kind of hate it. I absolutely hate it. It's one of my pet peeves. I hate it when Hollywood does this, where they're like, oh my god, look at us, us artists, we're so important, we make life joyful, we bring the rest of you guys, the rest of you peasants, happiness. Like, I hate that. I absolutely hate that they assume that people who enter other careers that have nothing to do with the arts are just there for the paycheck, and they're just, working a 9-to-5 in order to keep a house on top of their heads and feed their kids, but otherwise they all secretly dream of being a Broadway star, or they all secretly want to be a movie star or write, scripts and stuff. Like, not everyone wants that. There are many different career paths. They're all valid depending on what you want out of life, and I kind of hate that Hollywood is hammering home this message that only stars, only actors can feel fulfilled in their careers. Like, it's one of my pet peeves. I absolutely despise it. Overall, like I already said, I had a very fun time with this film. I think the main issue here is that whilst it does try to tackle this really important topic of highlighting the story of this LGBTQ character, also trying to empower her and give her that moment of community and that moment of acceptance that she deserves as someone who has been outcasted wrongfully in her community. At the same time, I do think that this film struggles to balance that element of the story with the cast, the incredible cast of Meryl Streep and Nicole Kidman and James Corden, doing their thing and being loud and proud of what they do in this film. The film very much struggles in its attempt to try and pay attention to all of these aspects of this story, and as a result, unfortunately, the character of Emma and her story somewhat gets shortchanged, and in the meantime we have these very one-dimensional characters that are being portrayed by these incredible actors that kind of distract from that main touching and poignant story. So with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving The Prom a 7 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on The Prom, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this film down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!